What's up guys? My name's 𝙒𝙖𝙩 and I am a first year medical student. If you are new here, welcome. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode of AD's RX for MD. Today we are going to be talking about how to stay organized in med school. And this is really important for obvious reasons. Anything you do, the more organized you are, the more on track you're going to stay. But this can also be really important because there's more than just lectures and studying. It depends on your school's layout and your curriculum, but I know at my school, in addition to that, we also have assignments that are called independent learning assignments, and there's usually between like 4 to 6 per testing cycle. So we have bi-weeklies. Sometimes they're not bi-weekly, sometimes they're every week. But we have bi-weeklies, and the only deadline for the ILAs is that they be completed before the test day. It's really important to keep up with which lectures you've studied already, which ones were difficult for you, how many times you've gone over certain lectures, because some lectures are going to come more easily than others and some you're going to need to look at more. So I have a method where I keep track of the big deadlines. So for example, when to get those ILAs done, when my exams are coming. We're gonna get into the details of how I stay organized. So the first thing that I want to share with you guys is what I use to stay organized. So like many of you out there, you probably use a planner, like a tangible planner. I prefer this. Some people like digital planners and that works for them, but I really like to kind of have this in my hand to be able to do quick edits on the fly. I also have a large planner on my wall that I'll show you. Really, any large planner will do. If it's a wall one or if it's a desk one, it can be paper, it can be dry erase, whatever you want it to be, but just having something big that you can look at a glance without pulling out your planner. And then I also have a past tracker that I've created on my computer that is literally a lifesaver. So first, let's get into what I do on my planner. So pretty much, I make daily schedules in my planner, and I've experimented with how I do this. I used to do my whole rundown of the month in this planner, but it really wasn't effective because you know how in a planner you have this page where you have the blocks and everything is on one page, but a lot of times it wasn't enough space to write everything. So I had to write it in these areas where there's more space to write, but everything's not on one page, so it's very easy to forget something. So I decided maybe doing the monthly overview in here wasn't the best idea, and I do that on my big planner on my wall, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So what I do here basically is at night I will finish whatever my tasks are for the day, and then I will go into the Google Calendar and look at what there is to do for tomorrow. So after looking at, how many lectures there are, if it's the beginning of the week, I'm going to be looking at how many ILAs there are. Then I will go into this planner and I will make my schedule for the very next day. And it's a very customized and tailored schedule for that specific day. So let me show you an example. So I like to write down literally every single detail, and this schedule, like I said, it changes a little bit depending on what I have to do on that day. So if you notice, I have my devotional scheduled for 6:45, but there are other days like this day where my devotional is scheduled for 6 a.m. That's because this day had a lot more required activities. All of the things that you see here with an asterisk by them, that's something that's required, and the more required activities there are, the more time I need in a day because that's something I have to go to and I can't watch it at 2x or 3x. But on this day, because we were actually leading up to our test, we didn't really have any new lectures, so pretty much all I needed to get done in that day was to do my Anki cards, do some practice questions, draw out the brachial plexus, and then we did have a required class called clinical skills that I anticipated to be over by about 3 o'clock. So that kind of changed. Okay, well, I don't have to get up as early today, but I lay this all out the night before so that when I get up the next day, I know exactly what I am doing, because I just don't like wasting time trying to figure out what's next. Okay, so here's that big wall calendar that I was telling you about. I have it hanging right over my computer at my desk. So when I spend time at this desk, I see this right in front of me. And as you see, I have RNA 1. RNA is review and assessment. It's just a quiz. I have the exam date on there. Those were pretty much the only big tasks and big days that we had for this module. But sometimes, like the last module we had like a short paper that we had to write, and so there was a due date for that, but we also had to turn in our sources before the paper, so there was a due date for that. So just depending on how many due dates there are, you may have a lot more on your calendar for the month. But this is my month at a glance, kind of the big things that I have to look forward to and make sure I'm prepared for. And then I also like to put my large to-do list for the month. So this is not the daily regimen of what I have to do, but these are things that maybe I have to get this done before the test. So for example, due later, these are actually personal things that I had to do. But I will also put my school tasks on her as well. But a big part of being organized is making sure you have time for your school tasks as well as your personal tasks. So the very last thing to share with you guys is my pass tracker. All right, so this is the pass tracker. This is actually the star of the show. And this is where I keep more track of like what lectures I've gone over, which ones I've made Anki cards for, how many Anki cards there were, when my test is, and how many days until my test. Of course, this is repeated because it's also on the wall calendar, but it's easier to just see an exact number of this many days until the test. Because sometimes you can look at a calendar and see like, oh, February 1st, but it's like, that's in 2 days. Also, I keep track of, if we have a weekly quiz, which topics on the quiz were hard for me so that I make sure I go back over those. So let's just talk about this from top to bottom. So down here I have tabs for each of my modules, and then I have some tabs for just some special things that really required a lot more of my attention. But basically, sometimes it can be really easy to forget that something has not been done yet. So I kind of have columns here to check over that. So the first thing is, have I made my Anki cards for each of the decks for that given week? And I include, not each of the decks, each of the lectures. In addition to my lectures, I also make Anki cards for those independent learning assignments because those are represented on our exams. So I want to make sure that I've actually studied them before the test comes. But I usually just focus on the lectures first, which are the ones that you see here numbered. So I have a column to just remind myself, hey, did you make your Anki cards? Yes. This column I don't fill in as much, but this is just the date that the lecture was given. It's not really that important. And then this column is also another really important column where if I've looked at any extra resources, I will list exactly what those are here, right here. This column is where I keep track of what topics from each lecture were just hard for me the first time that I need to review again. And this is good for, number one, making sure you see all the hard stuff and understand it before the test. But also it helps you to save time so that you're not just harping on something that you don't get over and over. I can just type it in this column here and move on, and at least I can get through the entire lecture and then come back to the things that are challenging for me. Okay, in this column, I keep track of how many Anki cards are in each deck, and then this will tell me the total number of Anki cards. And the reason why I like doing this is because up here, I have total Anki cards basically within a testing cycle. So for example, I think weeks 1, weeks 2, and yes, weeks 1 and 2 were on the same exam. So before week 3 had even happened, all I had was everything up here for week 1 and week 2. And so basically this will tell me how many total Anki cards I have between week 1 and week 2. I didn't put anything in here, but let's just do an example. So let's say there were 50 cards in this deck, 35, 20, 15, and we'll just leave it at that. Each week has its own Anki card total. That's here and here. But this number up here is going to tell you the total number of Anki cards that you have for subjects that pertain to your very next upcoming test. And then over here, I keep track of the date of the test, which this is for an old module, so that's why this is in the past, and what today's date is. But let's say my next exam was on February 15th. So that would mean, okay, this automatically keeps track of today's date. It's a formula that I put in there, and all you have to do is equal today, and this will always update. This is a field that I put in today, the date of my test, and up here there's also a formula. This is why I like using Excel, because you can program it and it will keep up. Basically, this is saying divide the number of cards by the number of days until my test. And that's going to tell me exactly how many cards I need to do in a day. So this is really after you have made all your Anki cards and gone through your daily study regimen, Once you start getting close to test day, if you want to make sure that you review everything equally, this is the number of cards that you would have to do a day. A lot of times I don't follow this. Most of the time I end up just focusing on those subjects that were harder for me. But it's there for anyone that likes to have things that are easily programmable. Now, these columns are also really important. This is the pass column. The pass is just how many times I have looked at that material. So if I've gone to lecture or watched the lecture, that's going to be 1 pass. I usually do not learn anything at lecture. The second pass is usually when I am making my Anki cards. My third pass would be when I study those Anki cards the very first time. And then the fourth pass, fifth pass, whatever may be, if you've looked at videos on it, if you have gone through those Anki cards multiple times, maybe, if you've had a study session with friends, or like for the brachial plexus, which we just did, a pass might be just drawing it out on my whiteboard. That's not necessarily looking over the notes again, but it's still some activity that requires me to recall that information. And this is important because if you have a lecture that has like only 1 or 2 passes and you're getting close to test day, you might want to spend a little bit more time on that subject, especially if it's one that's hard for you. And then this column here is basically how you gauge what's hard for you. So immediately after watching a lecture, I will fill in how difficult I think it is from 1 to 5. And you don't have to do this, but I have these cells programmed to turn a certain color. Basically, if I put a 5, it's like, ooh, that's really hard, that's bad, so we're gonna make it red. And if I put a 1, it's like, you know that really well, so it's green. I just like seeing the colors. That helps me to gauge really quickly where I need to fill color. If you guys really want a further rundown of how to program this kind of document, let me know, but for now I just want to stick to what I use this document for. So anyway, I only fill in how difficult I think each lecture was, and then again, this is another column or a cell that's been programmed to basically average all of the numbers that I put here. And if it's a high number, like I still think it's really hard, this is gonna be red, and it's gonna say you really need to review this week's content again. Just talk a little bit about what I do over here. So basically, when we have our quizzes, immediately after we go over the questions, and I will just kind of write something here to remind me what exactly they were testing on. And then I will review or write here the actual concept that I need to remember, and then I'll do the answer to that quiz question. Sometimes it can be a little bit challenging because we do go through it quickly, but for the most part, I'm able to get this information down over here, and it just helps me to really hone in on those things that I'm weak on that I may not have known I wasn't as prepared for. Alright, so that pretty much brings me to the end of this video. Honestly, I feel like it was really simple, and you might be thinking like, that's it. But honestly, organization does not have to be hard. You don't necessarily need a lot of tools. I think the most complicated thing about my organization techniques is the past tracker, more so the calculations and the formulas. But that's really important because you don't want to have to remake that document every module. It's going to get very tiring and you're not going to keep up with it. You're just going to put it aside. If you guys want to know a little bit about how to program some of the cells so that they automatically update, definitely let me know down below in the comments, and I will be happy to show you some more detail on that. But that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining me and watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.